Howdy, Fullmetal Cowboy, straight shooting a review of the anime, The Slayers Next. This is Season 2 of the Slayers anime series, which is an adaptation of Hajime Kanzaki's light novel series of the same name, which for a time has been out of print in the United States after Volume 8 was released. But I have some good news. J Novel Club, a distributor, brought Slayers back in print. It seems that there is going to be a bright future for die-hard Slayers fans when it comes to the light novels. But I suppose time will only tell if they will go further than what Tokyopop released back then, which was up to Volume 8. Before I continue, I would like to address that this review is unscripted and I will provide another version at a later time. And the reason that is the case is because I set a deadline for this review and I was busy focusing on my review of Fullmetal Alchemist. Not to mention I had some difficulty watching the episodes due to technical reasons. So that is why this review turned out the way it did. I know someone is going to say I could have just wrote the script of that review and release it whenever it's ready. Well, the thing is, I set myself a deadline on posting reviews of the Slayers once a year in response to a friend's birthday. I have a friend who is a big fan of the Slayers anime series, and I figured, what the hell? Since I am doing annual Sailor Moon reviews for my friend Sonia, why don't I do the same for the Slayers? For another friend. Now, who is this friend, you may ask? That's a secret! And yes, I specifically quoted a certain character that is introduced in the Slayers Next, and I'll talk about him soon. Gee, I sure said a lot in the last minute. But anyway, as I was going into the Slayers Next, I was not expecting much given what I had experienced with the first season of the Slayers anime series. I do remember enjoying the Slayers a great deal in its first third, but when it got to the middle of the series, it definitely slowed down and I wasn't really having a lot of fun. And then it picked up speed in its last third, and I did enjoy it for what it was worth. But as for the Slayers Next, I was just expecting comedy, adventures, and the usual of what is to be expected with the Slayers anime series. And seeing as how there's not much of a large gap between the Slayers and the Slayers Next, I was expecting certain assets from the previous season to carry on throughout Slayers Next. And that was essentially the case, because the animation quality in the Slayers Next is about on par with the previous season. The difference is that Slayers Next improved on its animation. Just like the first season of the Slayers anime, the Slayers Next definitely took some shortcuts here and there, and honestly, that doesn't really bother me anymore. It actually adds to the charm of this series. Sure, it might affect my rating to some degree, but not by a large margin in any shape or form. However, while the Slayers Next is still fresh in my mind, I must say the finale of the Slayers Next is a visual treat, and I certainly miss the old days of anime, because, honestly, some of the animation in the finale was actually pretty damn good. The music in the Slayers Next is about the same as the music in the first season of the Slayers, with the big exceptions being the opening theme and the ending theme of the Slayers Next. And I just want to say that I already missed the opening theme and ending theme to the first season of the Slayers anime, because those songs were catchy and damn good, especially for 90s anime. Now, I understand to differentiate the seasons, you have to change the opening and ending theme. I get that. I still miss those first opening and ending themes, but hey, I can always go back to them by watching them on YouTube. That's no problem. But while I'm watching an episode of The Slayers, that's the context I mean. I do miss them. However, the opening and ending theme of The Slayers Next are actually not that bad either. They're actually good. The opening theme to The Slayers Next is actually quite catchy. Maybe not as catchy as the previous one, but it's still catchy to some extent. And I've grown to love the opening to The Slayer's Next. Now, as for the ending theme of The Slayer's Next, I thought it was good too. It's a nice way to mellow out the episode as you are finishing on watching it. So, at least it does that job. Next, I want to talk about the voice acting of The Slayer's Next. And I just want to say right off that I will only be covering the English dub cast for this review. I went and watched the dub first because I had a feeling I would enjoy it more, despite it's not really an A-grade dub, but I knew it had its charm. Now, due to the deadline I had in place, I did not have time to watch The Slayer's Next subtitled, and when I do provide that other version at a later time, I will cover the original Japanese cast and English dub cast. Anyway, it really goes without saying that the English dub of The Slayer's Next as a whole is an improvement when you compare the previous season, where there were some cast members that did not deliver good overall performances. A prime example of that would be Daniel Cronin, the original English voice of Zelgadis. And thank God Crispin Freeman came in and redeemed that character's English voice. As for the rest of the main English dub cast from Season 1, they do return to reprise their roles in The Slayer's Next. And I want to talk about Lisa Ortiz, a voice actress who I have not experienced a lot of her work, and the only popular role that I am familiar with her is, of course, Lena Inverse. But from what I've heard so far throughout the Slayer's anime series, Lisa Ortiz delivers some of her best work through The Slayer's Next. And bravo! It's also great to hear Eric Stewart reprise his role as Gowry for The Slayer's Next. And I say this given that I have a soft spot for Eric Stewart as a voice actor. After all, he did voice Brock in Pokemon as well as Seto Kaiba from Yu-Gi-Oh!, which were two anime I watched when I was a kid. So yeah, Eric Stewart is a voice actor I am quite nostalgic towards. And he's perfectly fitting for a goofball like Gowry. While it is nice to hear certain cast members reprise their role from Season 1, there is some vocal delivery that is quite laughable. And I'm not saying this in a positive light. Some of the vocal delivery is quite bad, that it's funny. But I'm not really holding it against the dub of The Slayer's Next for these certain vocal deliveries. Because, truth be told, I think it adds to the charm of the Slayer's anime series when it comes to the dub. After all, The Slayers is a fantasy anime series with a comedic direction. Even if there are some laughably bad vocal deliveries here and there, it actually adds to the charm of The Slayers as an anime series, given the time period it came out and given that it's a comedy. One of the major exceptions, however, is Daniel Cronin as Zelgadis, like I mentioned earlier. There is one cast member, and well, what do you know? Suddenly it's daylight. It must be magic! Actually, the battery on my camera died during the recording of this review, so I had to recharge and wait till the next day to finish recording. Anyway, where was I? Ah yes, there is one fun addition to the English dub of The Slayers, and that's David Moo as Zelos. When I first heard Zelos' English voice in The Slayer's Next, I thought to myself, what kind of voice is that? But it didn't take long for David Moo's voice as Zelos to grow on me. And I think I know the secret to why David Moo is a great addition to the dub of The Slayer's Next. It's Zelos' catchphrase, "It's a secret." And that's why I like David Moo as Zelos. He's fun to listen to. Now around this point I would usually talk about the characters and then the story. But for this review, I'm actually going to flip it around because of one particular strength that The Slayer's Next has compared to the previous season. Before I continue, hold on a second. Great, my brother's already home as I'm recording this review. I swear the production of this review is cursed. I apologize apologize for having to lower my voice for the rest of this review. You betcha I'm going to do another version of this review in due time. When it comes to the plot of The Slayer's Next, there really isn't much to say other than the premise and the last 4 to 6 episodes, and that's because a great majority of the 26 episode run of The Slayer's Next revolves around Lena Inverse and her group going from place to place in search of Clare Bible manuscripts. And the Clare Bible, of course, is the one driving force for The Slayer's Next as a whole. That doesn't mean a great majority of The Slayer's Next is a waste of time. In fact, there is fun to be had with The Slayer's Next, and that's to be expected considering what is displayed in the first season. There is one episode of The Slayer's Next in particular that gave me a big laugh, and it's an episode where Gowry and Zelgadis disguise themselves as women because of a particular situation that Lena Inverse and the rest of the group got involved in. And this particular situation made room for a humorous episode. Hell, even Zelos disguised himself as a woman, and that's actually a funny sight. But there's one line in particular where Zelgadis almost blurts out his name and calls himself Lulu. And the line went, It's Lulu! That really did give me a big laugh because I would have never imagined that Crispin Freeman would have to say a line like that. But boy, that episode was a lot of fun. However, there is one thing in the story department of The Slayer's Next that is an improvement from the previous season, and that is focus. The previous season had Shabranigdo as this big evil, only to be defeated within the first third of the first season of the Slayer's anime. And after Shabranigdo is defeated, the first season of the Slayer's anime just does other things. Whereas the Slayer's Next focused on the Clare Bible being the driving force of the Slayer's Next from beginning to end. But the one thing that puts the Slayer's Next above the previous season are the characters. We get to see them reunite very early in the Slayer's Next, and there is actually a great amount of interaction between our main characters this time. A lot more than the previous season, which is understandable given how they were established in that previous season. We are also introduced to new characters. I already mentioned Zelos, and he's a fun addition. There is also Martina, who at first I thought was going to be a very annoying character, but believe it or not, she grew on me. And I also realized that she was a comedic foil for Lena Inverse. Despite what I said about the characters in The Slayer's Next, I do think character development is the one weak area when it comes to the characters as a whole in The Slayer's Next. And given the nature of the Slayer's anime series, I'm not expecting three-dimensional character development throughout this franchise. I can still have fun given the amount of development these characters even get. Zelgadis is still good old Zelgadis. Amelia is actually my least favorite main character in the Slayer's anime series, largely because she talks big about justice. So much that she tends to say justice all the time. But on the flip side, she is good-hearted and less obnoxious than a typical social justice warrior. I've yet to talk about antagonists in The Slayer's Next. Well, there's Gav, who is quite the loudmouth, but he is not the true standout antagonist in The Slayer's Next. That honor goes to Fabrizio. Even though he is a little bastard, he really does stand out amongst the antagonists thus far in the Slayer's anime series. And now on to two specific characters that I've yet to dive into that is exclusive to The Slayer's Next. And there's actually a good reason why I'm saving these two characters for last, but also bringing them up in the same topic. That's because of something in particular that happens in The Slayer's Next. And the characters I'm referring to are Gowry and Lena, as there is a relationship being formed between the two of them. And this is actually quite a sweet detail about The Slayer's Next. It was actually an interesting thing that was happening. And I actually found the resolution of that relationship, in terms of them starting a romantic relationship, to be quite sweet. Too bad it's undone in the finale. While I am enjoying the Slayers Next, as well as the Slayers anime series up to this point, I am not gonna let this slide, as I find this to be the biggest bullshit that I have seen thus far. Well, at least the Slayers Next fulfilled its objective, but the fact that there was build-up for Lena and Gowry to enter a relationship only to undo it? Yeah, I have a reason to complain on this very detail. At the end of the day, I like the Slayers Next more than the first season of the Slayers anime series. I know I am lowering my voice more. I'm just going to end it here. I will provide another version at a later time, as well as review supplemental material outside the main series of the Slayers in due time. I'm going to be shooting a 7 out of 10 for the Slayers Next. After all, The Slayers is a fantasy anime series with a comedic direction. So when you... Don't you just love interruptions from airplanes flying around? Anyway, after all, The Slayers is a fantasy anime series with a comedic direction. Yay! After all, The Slayers is a... Why am I... After all, The Slayers is a Okay. After all, God. I made that slip up and I'm now laughing at it.